Imagine this scene. You're standing in your mum's kitchen on Christmas Eve, wearing an apron with flour on your hands, while 35 guests laugh and drink in the living room behind you. Your mother walks in, looks at the cold, empty hob, and smirks. It's only 25 people. Why haven't you started yet? That was me on the 23rd of December 2024. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't tell her I ran a company turning over £4 million a year that she knew absolutely nothing about. Instead, I smiled, untied the apron, and booked a one-way flight to Miami, leaving behind an empty kitchen and a Christmas dinner that would never be cooked. My name is Eleanor Watts. I'm 38 years old. And this is the story of how I finally stopped being my family's unpaid servant. If you're watching this for the first time, please subscribe to Serene Drama Stories and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Right now, let's go back 15 years, because that's where it all began, Christmas 2009. I was 23, fresh out of university, with a media communications degree, and absolutely nothing lined up. The financial crash had swallowed the job market whole, and I was back in my childhood bedroom in Leeds, sending CVs into a void that echoed nothing back. The house smelled of cloves and pine that December. Mum had decorated every corner of the semi-detached with tinsel, pillar candles, and the ceramic nativity set she'd had since before I was born. 14 guests were expected for Christmas dinner. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and a few of Dad's business associates from his construction firm. "Eleanor, you're handling dinner this year," Mum announced while arranging a centrepiece in the dining room. She didn't ask. She informed. I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been drafting yet another cover letter. "The whole dinner? For 14 people?" "Amy has her coursework." Mum didn't even glance at me. She can't be stressed. My sister was 19, a first year at the University of Manchester. She was currently lying on the sofa scrolling through her phone, headphones around her neck, nowhere near a textbook. "I've got applications to finish," I said carefully. "There's a marketing position at Haworth Communications that closes Friday." Mum's voice took on that familiar edge, the one that signalled the conversation was already over. "This is family, Eleanor. Family always comes first." And there it was. The first sign. Amy received exemptions. I received assignments. They were never the same thing, but I was 23 and didn't yet have the language to say so. I spent the next 2 days in the kitchen. I roasted a 12-pound turkey, made roast potatoes from scratch, prepared parsnips and carrots, braised red cabbage, made bread sauce, cranberry compote, and 2 tarts. I laid the table, polished the good cutlery, and arranged the centrepiece Mum had abandoned halfway through. When guests arrived on Christmas Eve, I was still wearing the apron, a long streak of gravy across the front. Dad stood in the hallway with a glass of whiskey, introducing Amy to his business partner, Douglas Hartley. "This is my youngest. She's studying business management at Manchester. Sharp as anything, this one. Going to take over the firm one day." Douglas shook Amy's hand. "Brilliant." Following in her father's footsteps. That's what I like to see. I walked past them carrying a tray of smoked salmon blinis. Dad glanced at me, then turned back to Douglas without a word. That was the second sign. Amy was the future. I was the furniture. "Who made these?" Douglas's wife, Patricia, picked up one of the blinis, eyes wide. "These are absolutely divine." "That's just Eleanor," Mum said, waving a dismissive hand. "She has time for cooking." "No job at the moment," Patricia gave me a sympathetic look, but I was already retreating to the kitchen. The pattern repeated itself at every gathering after that. Christmas, Easter, Mum and Dad's anniversary dinner, birthday parties, summer barbecues. I was always in the kitchen, always setting up, always clearing away after. Amy was always at the table, charming guests, being presented. By 2013, I'd started my own events management business. I called it Luminary Events. I was good at logistics, vendor management, creating experiences people remembered. I'd learned those skills, ironically enough, in my parents' kitchen. But when I mentioned it to Mum, she barely looked up from her magazine. Events management, like children's birthday parties. Corporate events, actually. Product launches, awards ceremonies, conferences. That's nice, love. Can you pop to Sainsbury's on your way home? We need milk. She never asked about it again. Neither did Dad, neither did Amy. So I stopped offering. For 12 years, I built luminary events in silence. In 2015, I landed my first major corporate client, a Leeds tech startup that paid me £11,000 to organise their launch event. By 2019, I had 7 members of staff and an office in the northern quarter of Manchester. By 2023, I was managing events for FTSE 100 companies, luxury hospitality brands, and national charity galas. But whenever I visited my parents, I wore jeans and a plain jumper. I drove my old Volkswagen Golf instead of the Audi I'd just paid off. I never mentioned the 26 people on my payroll or the 4.3 million in revenue we'd posted in 2024. Because they never asked, and I was exhausted by offering things that would only be dismissed. Last November 2024, was particularly humiliating. I'd just closed a deal with a premium hotel group worth £650,000. I was running on 4 hours sleep and professional adrenaline, flying high in the way that only a hard-won contract can produce. Then I walked into my parents' house, and Mum handed me an apron. The turkey needs basting every half hour. I've made a schedule, 26 people reported to me. I negotiated contracts with chief executives. I'd been profiled in 3 industry publications. My mother handed me a basting schedule. I took the apron. I basted the turkey. I served dinner to 17 people, while Amy talked about the pressures of her role as marketing director at Dad's company, a position that had been handed to her, not earned. Amy's doing phenomenal work, Dad said proudly at the table. Revenue's up 14% this year. I could have mentioned that Luminary's revenue was up 33%. But what was the point? They'd find a way to minimise it. They always did. After dinner, with my arms elbow-deep in washing up water, I made a quiet decision. This would be the last time. 15 years of being overlooked was enough. I didn't know yet exactly how I'd break the cycle. I just knew I couldn't keep performing invisibility while building something real. I dried my hands, hung up the apron, and drove back to my flat. The one my family had never visited, because they'd never thought to ask. 2 weeks later, on the 22nd of December, an email arrived that would change everything. The 22nd of December, 2024, 9:51 in the morning. I sat in my corner office at Luminary Events, watching sleet drift past the floor-to-ceiling windows. The Manchester skyline was dull and steel grey, the way it often is in December, but my desk was alive. Vendor contracts, seating plans, a venue map for a New Year's gala, and a coffee going cold beside my keyboard. Jonathan Ashby knocked on the glass door. He was 53, quietly silver-haired, with the measured calm of someone who'd survived every storm he'd ever walked into. He'd joined Luminary as my operations director back in 2016, when the company was still me, a spreadsheet, and a lot of hope. He was the closest thing I had to a business partner. "You need to see this," he said, setting his tablet face up on my desk. I leaned forward. An email from Cassandra Whitmore, CEO of Alderton Group, a British hospitality and real estate conglomerate valued at approximately £3.6 billion. Subject: Partnership Proposal. Exclusive Event Services 2025. I read it twice. I read it a third time just to be certain. Alderton Group wanted to sign an exclusive contract with Luminary Events. Every corporate function, client dinner, investor gala, and product launch across their entire portfolio for the full year. They had reviewed our work portfolio, spoken to our references, and conducted thorough due diligence. The proposed contract value, £2.2 million. This is real? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Jonathan nodded slowly. I rang their legal team this morning to verify. It's real. But there's a condition. There was always a condition. Cassandra Whitmore insists on meeting you in person before signing. She doesn't commit to partnerships with people she hasn't looked in the eye. He paused. The meeting is scheduled for the 24th of December, 11 in the morning. Their UK headquarters are in London, but Cassandra is flying in from their Miami office, specifically for this. The 24th, Christmas Eve, can we push it? I asked. She's flying to Switzerland on Boxing Day, won't be reachable until mid-January. Jonathan leaned forward. Eleanor, if we don't sign by the 24th, they go to their second choice. Prestige Occasions has been pitching them for months. Prestige Occasions. My biggest competitor in the corporate event space. They'd been circling my clients all year, like something waiting for a gap in the fence. The stakes came into focus immediately. This wasn't simply a contract. Alderton Group was the kind of client whose name opened every door in the industry. Their endorsement would generate introductions to their board, their investors, their international partners. It would mean expansion into the London market, something I'd been building toward for 3 years. It would mean luminary events becoming a national brand, not just a northern one. And if I lost this to Prestige Occasions, the industry would notice, clients would ask questions, momentum would fracture. The reputation I'd built over 12 years could begin to erode, quietly, then quickly. There's something else, Jonathan said. He scrolled down on the tablet. Cassandra mentioned something in her original inquiry. I almost missed it. He turned the screen toward me. I read the line he'd highlighted. I was struck by your feature in the Forbes Europe Emerging Entrepreneurs list earlier this year. Your philosophy around sustainable event design maps closely to Alderton's values. I look forward to meeting the woman behind Luminary Events, the Forbes feature. It had run in September. I'd sat for a 2-hour interview, been photographed in this very office, quoted at length about innovation and client experience in the live events industry. The piece described me as a quietly formidable force, reshaping how British corporations think about gatherings. It was the proudest professional moment of my life. I had never shown it to my family. What would have been the point? Mum would find something to criticize. The photo angle, perhaps, or the fact that I wasn't smiling widely enough. Dad would compare my numbers to his. Amy would roll her eyes and change the subject back to herself. But Cassandra Whitmore had read it. Cassandra Whitmore was impressed. Book the travel, I told Jonathan. Whatever I need to get to London by 11 on the 24th. He was already moving. Train from Manchester Piccadilly to Euston, 7:42 a.m, arrives 9:58. Hotel near Canary Wharf. Meeting at Alderton's Tower, 11 sharp. I nodded, feeling the particular cocktail of excitement and controlled nerves that precedes every significant deal. But beneath it, something else shifted. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Mum called me. Important. I stared at those 2 words for a long moment. In my experience, important from my mother meant one of 2 things. Someone was unwell, or she needed something from me. Given that I'd had no news of illness, option 2 seemed likely. I should have ignored it. I should have turned my entire focus to the most significant opportunity my company had ever been offered. But 15 years of conditioning does not simply evaporate. The daughter in me, the one who still, somewhere beneath the competence and the corner office, craved a word of acknowledgement. That daughter picked up the phone and called. She answered before the second ring. Finally. I've been trying to get hold of you all morning. It was 10:10. She had sent one text. What's going on? I kept my voice neutral. Christmas plans have changed. Amy's bringing friends this year, and your Uncle David's family are coming up from Bristol. 25 people total. 25 people. A number that, professionally, would excite me. Personally, it filled me with a very specific dread. That's quite a lot, I said, which is exactly why I need you here tomorrow. Early. There's the cooking, the decorating, the table setting. Amy's got far too much on with work. She can't be expected to. Mum, I stopped her. I can't. I have a business trip. A business trip? At Christmas? I'm travelling to London tomorrow. I have a client meeting on the 24th. A pause. Then she laughed. She actually laughed. London for what? One of your little corporate does? One of my little corporate does. £2.2 million. It's a significant meeting with a major client group. Eleanor, please. We both know your events work can be rearranged. This is family. There it was again. Family. The word she had weaponized since I was 23 years old. I can't cancel this trip. Can't or won't. My jaw tightened. Both silence. I heard her sharp intake of breath, the particular sound that always preceded the guilt. Do you have any idea how much effort I've put into making this Christmas special? Amy has been under enormous pressure at work. She needs this. Her friends are important people, colleagues, potential contacts for your father's business. This isn't just a dinner party, Eleanor. It's networking. Networking. For Amy. For Dad's company. Never once for me. My answer is no, Mum. What did you just say? I said no. I won't be there tomorrow. I won't be cooking for 25 people. I have a meeting that cannot be moved. Her voice turned cold. You are being completely selfish. You always have been. Amy gives everything to this family, and you can't even cook one meal. One meal, Eleanor. I closed my eyes. 15 years of this conversation. 15 years of being called selfish, for having boundaries, for having ambitions, for refusing to exist purely in service of everyone else's comfort. My answer is no. What meeting could possibly justify abandoning your family at Christmas? A contract worth over £2 million. Silence. A beat. Just long enough that I thought perhaps she had finally heard me. Then she laughed again. Dismissive. Cruel. £2 million. Eleanor, honestly. You plan office parties. You're not some city executive. Something cracked inside me. Not broke. Cracked. A fissure that had been forming quietly since I was 23 split further open. You don't know the first thing about what I do. I know enough. I know you're 38, unmarried, with no real structure to your life. I know you've spent years on this little hobby while your sister has built an actual career. And I know that when your family needs you, you are never there. Each sentence landed like something deliberate, measured, designed to wound exactly where it would. Through the glass wall of my office, Jonathan was watching me. He'd heard enough of these calls over the years to recognize the tone of them. I'm going to London, I said quietly. You'll need to make other arrangements for Christmas dinner. If you walk out on this family, don't you dare think about coming back. I should have felt devastated. Instead, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Goodbye, Mum. I hung up. For a long moment, I sat very still, phone in hand, watching the sleet against the glass. My heart was going fast, but my mind was oddly calm, the way it sometimes goes after a decision that was always inevitable. Jonathan appeared in the doorway. You all right? She wanted me to cancel London to cook Christmas dinner for 25 people. I paused. When I said no, she told me not to come back. He walked in and sat down. Jonathan Ashby, who had watched me build luminary events from a one-woman operation to a nationally recognized company, who had seen me negotiate with chief executives and manage crises that would have unraveled most people. He sat across from my desk and looked at me steadily. Eleanor, I've worked with you for 8 years. I've seen you handle situations that would destroy most people. You're one of the most capable people I know. He paused. But when it comes to your family, you become someone smaller. Someone you're not. I looked away. He wasn't wrong. This is the moment, he said. You can keep making yourself smaller to fit their expectations, or you can choose something different. But you can't keep doing both. My phone buzzed. A text from Amy, Mums in Pieces. Cheers for that. Couldn't you put family care first for literally one day? So selfish, I typed back. I have a work commitment. Her reply arrived in seconds. Work? You organise events. It's not exactly saving the world. Get over yourself. I could have replied. I could have explained. I could have spent the next hour defending myself in a text thread that would go nowhere. Instead, I deleted the conversation entirely. Book my train, I told Jonathan. I'm going to London. He was already at the door. He stopped once, hand on the frame. You're doing the right thing, Eleanor, for what it's worth. It was worth a great deal. That evening, I went home to my flat. A 2-bedroom apartment in the northern quarter that cost £2,800 a month, with exposed brick walls and a view across the rooftops toward the Pennines. The flat my family had never seen, because they had never thought to ask where I lived. I packed a small suitcase. Professional clothes for the meeting, comfortable layers for travel, my laptop, the Alderton contract notes, and one more thing. The September issue of Forbes Europe, folded open to page 43, where my face looked back at me from a full-page photograph. I wasn't entirely sure why I packed it, insurance perhaps, or armour, or simply proof, solid, printed, ink on paper proof that I wasn't imagining the life I had built. At 9:15 p.m. on the 23rd of December, I locked my flat and took a taxi to Piccadilly Station to catch the sleeper connection down to London. Out of the window, the Manchester skyline slipped away behind me. Somewhere in Leeds, 20 miles east. My family were presumably furious at my absence. Let them be furious. I had a contract to sign. The East Midlands train reached London Euston just before 10 in the morning. December grey, that particular London grey, that sits low and even over the whole city like a lid. I took the Underground to Canary Wharf, walked 2 minutes through crisp, cold air, and arrived at Alderton Group's headquarters at 20 to 11. A 40-storey glass tower, its surface reflecting a pewter sky and the silver surface of the Thames below. The receptionist checked my ID and issued a visitor lanyard. Miss Whitmore is expecting you. 38th floor. The lift felt like it took years. My pulse was doing something unreasonable against my ribs. But this was familiar territory. I'd felt this before every major pitch, every significant signing. The nerves were not a warning. They were fuel. As the floor numbers climbed, my phone buzzed. A call from Amy. I declined it without hesitation. Another buzz. A voicemail. Against every sensible instinct, I pressed play. Eleanor, it's Amy. Mum is completely falling apart. None of the catering companies will come out on Christmas Eve. Surprise. Dad's been ringing round all morning, but no one can help. And listen, Cassandra Whitmore is supposed to be coming to our Christmas dinner tonight, and there's nothing to serve her. This is completely your fault. If you'd just... I stopped the voicemail. Replayed one sentence. Cassandra Whitmore is supposed to be coming to our Christmas dinner tonight. I stared at my phone as the lift slowed. Cassandra Whitmore, CEO of Alderton Group, the woman I was about to meet, was going to my parents' house for Christmas dinner. The lift opened onto a marble reception area with views across the Thames. An assistant in a navy blazer approached with a composed smile. Miss Watts, Miss Whitmore is ready. Please follow me. I followed her down a corridor lined with architectural photography and framed sustainability awards. My mind was moving fast, assembling pieces. Cassandra Whitmore knew my family, or at least she'd been invited, which meant she knew Dad, probably through business circles. The construction and property development worlds overlapped more than people imagined. Leeds, Manchester, London. At senior levels, the networks collapsed into the same rooms. Did Cassandra know I was Richard Watts's daughter? Had she connected luminary events to the family she was visiting for Christmas? The assistant opened a door to a corner meeting room. Floor-to-ceiling glass on two sides, the Thames glittering below. A long table covered with legal documents, 2 glasses of water, and a leather folder at each seat. And standing at the head of the table, Cassandra Whitmore, mid-50s, silver hair, cropped elegantly, the kind of sharp, clear eyes that suggested she had built her empire not through luck, but through an almost forensic attention to what other people missed. She wore a camel blazer and simple gold earrings. Her handshake was firm and unhurried. Miss Watts, it's genuinely wonderful to finally meet you. The pleasure is entirely mine, Miss Whitmore. She gestured toward the chairs. Shall we? I have a car to Leeds this afternoon. Leeds. My stomach contracted. I sat down, opened my folder, prepared to sign the most significant contract in luminary events history, and tried, with everything I had, not to think about what would happen when Cassandra Whitmore arrived at my parents' house tonight. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something directly. Have you ever been made to feel invisible by the very people who should have been celebrating you? Have you ever had your success dismissed, your ambitions minimized, your hard work treated as an inconvenience? If that's you, type 1 in the comments. And if you've ever finally set a boundary and chosen yourself, type 2. If you want to know what happened when Cassandra Whitmore walked into my family's Christmas dinner, please hit the like button and subscribe to Serene Drama Stories. Now, back to the story. The contract signing took just under an hour. Cassandra Whitmore was thorough in the way that only someone who'd made serious mistakes early in their career learns to be. She read every clause, asked sharp questions about capacity, vendor contingencies, and staffing during peak periods. I answered everyone. 12 years of preparation had pointed toward this room. At 12 minutes past 12, we both signed contract reference ALD 202412224. A Alderton staff photographer took a photo of us shaking hands, the Thames behind us. Cassandra's assistant notarized the documents and presented me with my copy in a burgundy leather folder embossed with the Alderton Group crest. Welcome to the Alderton family, Cassandra said, and she smiled with genuine warmth. I have every confidence in what we'll build together, as do I. We exchanged a few pleasantries while her assistant began gathering documents. Cassandra mentioned her car to Leeds as she pulled on her coat, and then added, almost as an afterthought, I don't suppose you know the Watts family. Richard Watts. He runs a construction materials business out of Leeds. His wife Margaret invited me to their Christmas dinner this evening. I wouldn't normally accept, but Richard has been on my radar as a potential investor for a northern development we're planning. I'm told the dinner is rather spectacular. Wonderful food, apparently. The food I was supposed to have cooked. I kept my expression perfectly neutral. The CEO in me, the one who had spent 12 years managing unexpected moments, held absolutely steady. I've come across the name, I said. Cassandra studied me for just a moment, head slightly tilted, with those sharp, clear eyes. You know, there's something quite familiar about you, Miss Watts. The surname, perhaps. Any connection to the Leeds Watts family? This was the moment. I could have told her everything. I could have explained that Richard and Margaret were my parents, that Amy was my sister, that I had spent 15 years cooking their Christmas dinners while building the company she'd just signed a £2.2 million contract with. The full, extraordinary, almost absurd circularity of it. But I didn't. It's a fairly common name in Yorkshire, I said. Cassandra nodded, apparently satisfied, and left. I sat alone in the conference room for several minutes after the door closed. The contract folder in my hands felt solid, real, heavier than paper should. She didn't know. She had no idea that the spectacular Christmas dinner she was driving north toward had been expected to materialize through my hands. That the woman who'd just impressed her enough to write a cheque for £2.2 million was the same woman her host family had spent 15 years treating as household staff. She didn't know that her new business partner had been called selfish, talentless, and delusional by those same people fewer than 30 hours ago. A quiet, unfamiliar feeling settled over me as I tucked the contract folder into my bag and stood up. Not triumph, not revenge, something closer to completion. I had what I came for. Whatever happened in Leeds tonight was no longer my responsibility. I took the train back to Manchester that afternoon, arriving home just before 6, exactly the time my family's Christmas dinner was supposed to begin. I ordered Thai food, poured a glass of wine, and turned my phone face down on the kitchen counter. For the first time in 15 years, I spent Christmas Eve entirely alone. It was the most peaceful evening I could remember. I didn't know yet what was unfolding in Leeds. I wouldn't know the full story until the 26th of December, when Patricia Hartley, Douglas's wife, the woman who had admired my blinnies 15 years ago, called me directly. But I can tell you now, because I eventually pieced it together from 3 separate accounts. At 5:30, my mother walked into her kitchen, expecting the usual scene. Appetizers plated and chilling, the turkey resting under foil, roast potatoes crisping in the oven, every surface in organized motion. Instead, she found cold appliances, clear countertops, and no Eleanor Richard. Her voice carried through the house. "Richard, where's the food? Where's Eleanor?" My father appeared from the sitting room, adjusting his cufflinks. "I assumed you'd sorted that. She was supposed to be here hours ago." Amy came downstairs in a red dress, glass of Prosecco already in hand. "What's all the shouting about?" "Your sister has abandoned us. There's nothing. No dinner, no starters, nothing." What followed was approximately 50 minutes of frantic, humiliating chaos. Phone calls to every catering company in Leeds, all booked, all closed for the holiday. A desperate trip to the Marks and Spencer food hall on Briggate, only to find the prepared meal section stripped to bare shelves by panicked Christmas shoppers. My father rang 3 Leeds restaurants and was politely declined by all of them. By 6 o'clock, when the first guests began arriving, the Watts family dining table held the following: 2 supermarket rotisserie chickens, 3 bags of pre-washed salad leaves, a cheese and chutney selection from the petrol station M&S, a box of supermarket mince pies, and dinner rolls still in their cellophane. Patricia Hartley, who had been attending my parents' Christmas gatherings for 15 years, stood in the living room and looked around with barely concealed bewilderment. "Margaret, you look a bit flustered. Everything all right?" "Perfectly fine." Mum's smile was brittle as frozen pudding, a small catering hiccup. Last-minute adjustments. 25 guests moved through the beautifully decorated house. Mum had outdone herself with the garlands, the candles, the velvet ribbons on the banisters. But the food told a different story. This was not the elegant, generous Christmas dinner my mother had been promising people for weeks. This was a disaster wearing tinsel. At 7:15, Cassandra Whitmore arrived. She came in with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Pearl earrings, camel coat, a bottle of vintage Bordeaux in hand. She shook my father's hand, complimented Mum's decorations, exchanged pleasantries with Amy. "Thank you so much for including me. I've heard so much about your Christmas parties." My mother's smile tightened fractionally. "Yes, this year is a little different from usual. We had some unexpected challenges." Cassandra glanced toward the dining room, where the rotisserie chickens sat in their plastic trays. Her expression remained impeccably polite, but I imagined she was quietly recalibrating her impression of the Watts family's claimed hospitality. Dad steered everyone toward the sitting room. Mum poured wine with particular generosity. Amy worked the room with professional cheerfulness, deflecting attention from the obvious. And then Patricia Hartley, scrolling through her phone near the fireplace, stopped quite suddenly and went very still. Oh my goodness. She said it loudly enough for 6 people to hear. Richard? Margaret, come and look at this. She held up her phone. On the screen, a LinkedIn post, published that afternoon. A photograph of Cassandra Whitmore shaking hands with someone in a glass-walled office overlooking the Thames. The caption read, "Delighted to announce Alderton Group's partnership with Luminary Events and the remarkable Eleanor Watts. Excited for what we'll create together in 2025. Alderton Group Events Industry, Forbes Patricia, looked up from the screen with genuine confusion. Eleanor Watts? Isn't that your daughter? The room did not go completely silent. There was still background conversation, still the sound of Fairy Tale of New York playing from the kitchen speaker. But in the cluster of people around Patricia Hartley, the quiet fell like a curtain dropping. My mother stared at the screen. Her colour drained so completely that even her careful foundation couldn't hide it. What is that? That's Eleanor, Patricia said, zooming in. Shaking hands with Cassandra Whitmore. In what looks like a very expensive London office, Cassandra herself moved forward, peering at Patricia's phone with interest. Her expression shifted through recognition, then surprise, then something that looked unmistakably like delighted amusement. Eleanor Watts, Cassandra said slowly. Your daughter is Eleanor Watts, founder of Luminary Events. My mother's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Yes, Eleanor is our daughter, but I don't quite understand. What is Luminary Events? Cassandra gave a small, warm laugh. Margaret, Luminary Events is one of the most respected corporate event management companies in the north of England. I signed a £2.2 million contract with them this morning. £2.2 million. The number sat in the air above the assembled guests, like something with its own gravitational pull. My father went pale. 2 million? That's more than our company turns over in a year. Eleanor has built something genuinely remarkable, Cassandra continued, seemingly unaware of the complete architectural collapse she was causing in my parents' Christmas. I was introduced to her work through her Forbes Europe profile. The piece on her was extraordinary. Her thinking around sustainable event design is years ahead of where the industry is going. Forbes. Amy's voice cracked on the single syllable. Lily was in Forbes. Patricia was already searching. Oh yes, here it is. September issue. Eleanor Watts, the quietly formidable force reshaping British corporate events. She turned the screen around so the group could see. There I was, in my Manchester office, arms folded, looking directly into the camera, professional, composed, completely, evidently successful. Everything my family had convinced themselves I wasn't. More guests drifted over, drawn by the shift in atmosphere. Phones were produced. People read aloud. It says she has 26 employees. Her company posted over 4 million in revenue this year. Listen to this quote. I don't believe in performing success. I believe in building it quietly and letting it speak. My mother stood at the centre of it all, motionless, while her carefully constructed Christmas disintegrated around her. Why didn't she tell us? Margaret whispered. It came out more as a question directed at herself than at anyone else in the room. Cassandra tilted her head gently. Perhaps she wasn't given the opportunity. The silence that followed was devastating. Patricia Hartley, who had been bringing wine to the Watts family Christmas for 15 years, spoke into it softly. You know, Margaret, I always used to wonder about Eleanor. She was always in the kitchen when the rest of us were at the table. Whenever I asked about her, you changed the subject. She paused. She seemed so capable. Those blinnies she made years ago. Best things I've tasted at a party. I always assumed she'd do something remarkable. Turns out she did. Douglas Hartley, who had spent 15 years shaking my sister's hand while I carried platters past him, turned to my father with something careful in his expression. Richard. I had no idea Eleanor was running a company of that size. We could have done business together, years ago. My father had no answer. Amy had gone from pale to a deep, patchy red. She held her wineglass with both hands. She never said anything. She let us all think she was. Think she was what, exactly? Cassandra asked. One eyebrow, barely perceptibly, rose. Unsuccessful? Unimportant? Amy's mouth closed. Cassandra surveyed the room with the composed clarity of someone who had just understood a situation completely. I met Eleanor this morning. She was precise, prepared, and one of the most genuinely impressive executives I've encountered this year. We spoke for nearly an hour before signing. A beat. She didn't mention she was related to you. Another blow, delivered without cruelty, which somehow made it worse. She didn't tell you we were her family. Mum's voice was very small. I asked directly whether she had any connection to the Leeds Watts family. She said it was a common surname in Yorkshire. The implication settled across the room like frost. Eleanor hadn't claimed them. Had kept the connection carefully, deliberately hidden. Not out of embarrassment about herself, but out of something else entirely. Something that told its own story about what 15 years had cost her. Oh, Patricia breathed, the full picture arriving. That's why she's not here. That's why there's no dinner. She was in London this morning signing this contract, while you expected her to cook for 25 people, Douglas added, his tone quiet and unhurried and damning. My father's face had moved through pale, through purple, and arrived somewhere I don't have a precise colour for. Now, this is a private family matter, is it? Cassandra asked pleasantly, because from where I'm standing, it appears that a very successful businesswoman has spent 15 years being treated as domestic support. And when she had an opportunity of genuine professional significance, a contract with my company, as it happens, the expectation was that she would set it aside to cook dinner rolls. She let the sentence land. I think I understand now why Eleanor didn't mention the connection. She set down her untouched wineglass and smiled the smile of someone who has seen everything and is surprised by nothing. Please do give Eleanor my regards when you speak to her, and do thank her on my behalf. If she hadn't chosen to be in London this morning, we might not have found quite the right moment to sign. She reached for her coat. Richard, Margaret, thank you for the invitation. It was most illuminating. I hope you have a restful Christmas. The front door closed behind her, and then the room erupted. Guests clustered in corners, voices low and urgent. Phones moved from hand to hand. People read Forbes quotes to each other. My mother sank into the armchair by the fireplace, as though her legs had simply stopped working. My father retreated to his study and closed the door with a firmness that stopped just short of a slam. Amy disappeared upstairs, footsteps fast on the landing above, and across the city in my flat, I sat on the sofa with a glass of Malbec and a box of pad thai, entirely unaware that my family's Christmas had just burned down without me. I didn't learn the full account until the 26th, when Patricia Hartley rang me. Eleanor, she said. Her voice was careful. I owe you an apology. I've sat at your parents' table for 15 years, and I don't think I once asked what you actually did for a living. That was wrong, Patricia. You were never the one who needed to apologize. No. But I want you to know what was said on Christmas Eve. About you. Cassandra Whitmore told that room you were one of the most impressive executives she'd met this year. Every single person there heard it. She paused. Your parents have a great deal to reckon with. I don't think the people who were there will forget what happened in a hurry. A small, quiet part of me felt something that wasn't entirely unlike satisfaction. A larger part simply felt tired. Thank you for telling me. Of course. And Eleanor, congratulations. On the contract. On everything. You've clearly worked incredibly hard. You deserve every bit of what's coming. No one in my family had ever said those words to me. It took someone who owed me nothing to say them first. Christmas night. I sat on the sofa with the remains of my takeaway, and a film I can't now remember, and I thought my phone had accumulated 14 missed calls, 38 text messages, and 7 voicemails since the 23rd, all from family members I was not yet ready to speak to. I read the messages without responding. Mum, 6:44 p.m. Ring me immediately. Mum, 7:19 p.m. Eleanor, this is serious. Cassandra Whitmore knows who you are. Mum, 8:23 p.m. How could you humiliate us like this in front of everyone? Mum, 9:07 p.m. Please call. We need to talk. Amy, 7:52 p.m. Are you actually kidding me right now? Amy, 8:34 p.m. You made us look like complete idiots in front of 25 people. Amy, 10:22 p.m. Mum is having a breakdown. Hope you're pleased with yourself. Dad, 9:51 p.m. Eleanor, we need to discuss what happened. This isn't how family conducts itself. I read each one. The manipulation was architectural in its precision. The guilt shifting, the blame directing, the complete, unblemished absence of accountability. Not one message acknowledged the contract. Not one mentioned luminary events. Not one said anything that resembled well done, or I didn't know, or I'm sorry. They were upset because they had been embarrassed. The source of the embarrassment, the 15 years that had preceded it, did not appear to interest them. My phone rang. Jonathan, Merry Christmas, I answered. Merry Christmas, Eleanor. How are you? Better than I expected. It was true. The contract's signed. Cassandra was everything I hoped. She sent a note to the company inbox this afternoon. Said you were even more impressive in person than your reputation suggested. A pause. I also heard about Leeds. Cassandra's assistant passed something along to the team. The Watts family Christmas was quite the occasion, apparently. I laughed. A proper, surprised laugh. I can only imagine. You made the right call. You chose your company, your career, your future. Jonathan's voice was steady. You don't owe them anything, Eleanor. I know. And for the first time in 15 years, I actually believed it without qualification. After the call ended, I opened my laptop and began writing. Not a tirade, not an ultimatum. Something measured, considered, the kind of communication I might send to a client relationship that had broken down and required honest repair. To Richard Watts, Margaret Watts, Amy Watts' subject, Christmas, and going forward. I signed a contract with Alderton Group yesterday for £2.2 million. That is why I was not in Leeds on Christmas Eve. For 15 years, I have cooked and managed every family gathering, while my career was dismissed as a hobby. When I told Mum I had an important meeting, she laughed at me. When I set a boundary, I was told I was selfish. I am not selfish for having professional commitments. I am not ungrateful for having standards. I have not wasted my life. I have built something real. I will not apologize for choosing myself. I am open to rebuilding our relationship, but only on these terms. I will not be treated as domestic staff at family gatherings. I will be acknowledged as an equal member of this family. My career will be treated with basic respect, not praised, not celebrated, simply not dismissed. If those terms are not workable, I understand. But I will not return to the way things were. I will reach out when I'm ready to talk. Eleanor, I read it 3 times, revised 1 sentence, sent it. I did not expect a reply that night. I wasn't looking for one. They needed time. Time to sit with what had happened, to feel the full weight of what 15 years of dismissal had quietly built toward, to understand that the daughter they'd overlooked had not simply outpaced them professionally, but had, quite calmly, outgrown their capacity to define her. I finished my wine, turned off the lamp, fell asleep to the sound of the rain against my windows. A letter arrived on the 29th, not an email. An actual handwritten letter sent by courier overnight. The return address was the house in Leeds. The handwriting was my father's. I stood in my kitchen for a long time before opening it. Dear Eleanor, I have spent the last 5 days trying to understand how I failed to see what was directly in front of me. You have built a company, a real company, with employees and clients and revenue that exceeds my own. I didn't know because I never asked. I told myself I was a fair father. I told myself I treated both my daughters equally. But the truth is that I saw what I expected. I expected Amy to succeed, so I looked for her successes and celebrated them. I expected you to struggle, so I interpreted everything through that lens and ignored the evidence that contradicted it. I was wrong. I was deeply, embarrassingly wrong. I don't expect forgiveness. I haven't earned it. But I want you to know that I see what you've done. I am proud of you. Belatedly, inadequately, but genuinely. I would like, if you're willing, to know my daughter. To understand what you've built. To ask the questions I should have been asking for years. Whatever you decide, I will respect it. Your father, Richard. I read it 4 times. Set it on the kitchen counter next to my coffee machine. Made myself a cup of tea. Thought a letter doesn't erase 15 years. Words can be chosen carefully when the person writing them has 5 days of humiliation to motivate them. I knew that. I was under no illusions about the difficulty of what genuine repair would require, or the realistic probability that my mother, who had sent nothing but a brittle happy Christmas, hope you're well text, was nowhere near ready for the kind of honesty the situation deserved. But it was, at minimum, a start. The first genuine acknowledgement that had ever arrived from that address. I left it on the counter and went back to work. New Year's Eve 2024. I stood at my flat window and watched fireworks crack open over Manchester, brilliant against the December dark. The city glittered and roared. The final minutes of a year that had shifted everything. My phone lay on the coffee table, quieter now than it had been all week. I'd set new parameters, muted group threads. Calls declined on my own schedule, responses on my timeline, rather than their urgency, small adjustments. But they changed the texture of every day. At 23 minutes to midnight, I picked up my phone and called my father. He answered immediately. Eleanor, hi, Dad. A pause. In the background, I could hear the television, the faint sound of my mother asking who was calling. He didn't tell her. I didn't think you'd ring, he said. I almost didn't. I kept my voice even. But I've been thinking about what comes next. So have I. I'm willing to try to rebuild something. But not as it was. I understand. No more being the one who cooks while everyone else sits at the table. No more dismissing my work. No more treating me as though I'm a footnote in Amy's story. I paused. If I come to family gatherings, I come as a guest. An equal. If I stay, it's because I'm choosing to, not because it's been arranged that way without asking me. That's fair, more than fair. And I need you to be curious about my life, Dad. Actually curious. Ask about the company. Ask about my clients. Ask about what I'm building. Be interested. Not because it's polite, but because I matter enough to know. His voice was rougher when he replied. I should have been doing that for years. Yes, you should. The silence between us stretched. It was the first silence in 15 years that didn't feel hostile, just honest. Tired and honest. Your mum, he said carefully, is struggling with this. She's not there yet. I won't pretend otherwise. I know. I'd received no letter from Margaret. The brittle New Year's text had been the full extent of it. Give her time, he said. I've given her 15 years. He had nothing to say to that. Neither of us did. I'll come to Sunday dinner in January, I said finally. But I'll arrive as a guest. Someone else can handle the cooking. Order from somewhere, if you need to. I'll sort it. A small sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been something else entirely. I'll sort it. After I hung up, I stood at the window and watched the sky fill with light. In a few minutes it would be 2025. A new year. A chapter that I was going to write entirely on my own terms. Alderton Group was signed. Harold Thompson's business inquiry was sitting in my inbox waiting for a proposal. Entrepreneur magazine wanted an interview. Jonathan had already begun projecting a 38% revenue increase for the year ahead based on the Alderton contract alone. The company I had built in silence, in the margins of gatherings I was never meant to fully join, was about to step into the largest light it had ever occupied. And my family, the people who had overlooked me for so long, now knew, not because I had shouted or demanded or forced a reckoning, but because I had walked away, because I had chosen myself, quietly and without drama, and let the consequences follow naturally. There is a line I have carried for years without knowing quite where it came from. The best revenge is life that doesn't require one. I used to think that was about proving something. Now I understand it differently. It's not about them at all. It's about building something so fully your own that their opinion of it stops mattering. That's not revenge. That's self-respect, my knight. Fireworks tore open the sky above Manchester. My phone lit up with a message from Jonathan. Happy New Year, boss. 2025 is ours. I typed back, it already is. Then I opened a new document and began to write. Not a business plan, not a client proposal, just a list. The kind of clear, simple, honest list that I should have written years ago. I will attend family gatherings on my own terms, as a guest and an equal. I will not accept dismissal dressed up as humour or concern. I will not shrink my accomplishments to make other people comfortable. I will not apologise for choosing my career, my boundaries, or my future. I will respond to genuine attempts at connection. I will not respond to manipulation. My time is valuable. I will spend it accordingly. 6 sentences. 15 years in the making. Here is what I have learned, and what I want to leave you with. My family are not monsters. They are people who saw what they expected to see, and never thought to look further. My mother is not a villain. She's a woman who learned a particular kind of family hierarchy, and enforced it without ever questioning whether it was fair. My father is not irredeemable. He's a man who is, slowly and painfully, beginning to understand what he missed. My sister is not my enemy. She is someone who benefited from a dynamic she didn't create, but never challenged either. None of that absolved them. But understanding it freed me from needing them to be different before I could live well. They may never fully grasp what those 15 years cost. They may never offer the kind of complete, unreserved acknowledgement that I spent most of my adult life quietly wanting. And that's all right, because I've stopped measuring myself by their scale. My company is real. My success is real. The contract in the leather folder on my desk is real, and none of it required their permission, their recognition, or their blessing to exist. The moment I chose myself, untied the apron, booked the train, signed the contract, everything shifted. Not because the world changed overnight, but because I changed. I stopped waiting to be seen, and I started simply being. So that's my story. 15 years as the invisible one, the useful one, the one who cooked while everyone else was introduced to guests. And then one Christmas, a contract worth £2.2 million and a dining table with 2 rotisserie chickens from a petrol station forecourt, and everything that was always true finally became impossible to ignore. If you've ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or taken for granted by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, I want you to know something. Your success is not waiting for their approval. It is not contingent on their acknowledgement. It does not require their validation to be real. It only requires you to believe it first. Thank you for watching Serene Drama Stories. Thank you for staying with me through this. If this story has stayed with you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And leave a comment. I want to know. Have you ever had to choose yourself over what your family expected of you? What happened when you did? Until next time.